Who would have thought a Make America Great Again hat could spark a 911 call? Karen thought she had me trapped, but had no idea she was about to humiliate herself in front of the most influential person in the state. It was one of those cool, sunny mornings when everything feels just a little too perfect, almost like a setup for drama. My name is Kevin. I am 35, and like clockwork, I headed to my favorite local cafe. It is not some big-name chain, just a small, comfortable spot run by a kind older couple who know everyone in the neighborhood. It is my usual routine: black coffee, 2 eggs, toast, and the day's paper. Oh, and my red Make America Great Again hat. Yeah, I know it turns heads, but what can I say? Freedom of expression, right? I had barely settled into my booth when she walked in. She was the type you notice immediately, not because of her looks, but because of her vibe. Mid-50s eyes, perfectly styled hair, an oversized bag slung over her shoulder, an expression that screamed, "Who can I correct today?" She scanned the room like a hawk until her eyes landed on me. And there it was, the look. You know the one. Eyebrows raised, lips tightened, that sharp inhale of shock. She did not just notice me. She targeted me. I could practically see the gears in her head spinning. This is unacceptable. Someone has to say something. She marched over to my table, heels clicking like a countdown timer, and planted herself right in front of me. "Excuse me," she said, her tone loaded with disapproval. "Do you really think it is appropriate to wear that hat here?" I set my coffee down slowly, took a moment to process, and finally looked up at her. "Good morning to you, too." Her eyes narrowed. "Do not get smart with me. That hat represents everything wrong with this country. You should be embarrassed of yourself." Now I am not one to start drama, especially not before my caffeine kicks in, but something about her tone, it felt less like a conversation and more like a demand. And last time I checked, I did not owe anyone an explanation for my wardrobe choices. While I said, keeping my voice calm, "I am just here for breakfast, but thank for your concern," she did not budge. "Concern? Oh, you do not even get it. People like you. People like me," I cut in, raising an eyebrow. "Careful. That is a dangerous slope." Her face turned a shade of red I had not seen since my last 4th of July barbecue. She stepped back slightly, but only to reach in her oversized bag and pull out her phone. "I cannot believe this," she whispered, typing furiously. "This is a kid-friendly establishment, and you are strutting around in that. That symbol of division." I sipped my coffee, watching her out of the corner of my eye. She was not just mad, she was on a mission. Within seconds, she had raised her phone, her camera aimed directly at me. "Smile," she said, her voice practically vibrating with prideful self-righteousness. "I am recording this. People need to see what is happening right here in their own neighborhood." I cannot help but chuckle. What exactly are they going to see? A guy eating toast? "Oh, do not worry," she barked. "They will see plenty, and the police will too." That got my attention. The police for what? Ordering scrambled eggs. She did not answer, just kept typing and muttering under her breath. A few people in the cafe started to take notice, conversations hushed, heads turned, and phones quietly came out to film. I could feel the tension rising like a slow boil. The cafe owner, Mrs. Hernandez, approached carefully. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, glancing anxiously between us. "Oh, it will be," the woman said, her voice loud enough for the whole cafe to hear, "as soon as the authorities deal with this nonsense." Mrs. Hernandez looked at me, clearly puzzled. "Kevin, what is going on?" "Your guess is as good as mine," I said with a shrug. Evidently my hat is a public safety issue. The woman gasped dramatically. "It is not just a hat. It is what it stands for." At this point, I could feel my patience thinning. "Lady, I came here for breakfast, not a debate. Why do you not just let me enjoy my meal?" But she was not done. She stepped back, phone still pointed at me, and raised her voice even louder. "People like you think you can just stroll in anywhere, disrespecting everything decent, and face no consequences. Not today," someone in the back muttered. "Here we go." Before I could respond, she tapped her phone screen and brought it to her ear. My stomach sank as I realized she was not bluffing. She was actually calling the cops. "Hi, yes, I would like to report a problem," she said, her tone all dramatic and official. "Yes, a man is causing a scene in a local cafe. He is being threatening, and his attire is extremely offensive." I froze. Threatening? Offensive, I barely said 10 words to her. Mrs. Hernandez tried to intervene. Ma'am, please. No, the woman interrupted. This is unacceptable. I am doing this for everyone here. The cafe was dead silent now, except for her voice and the occasional sound of someone's phone recording. The cops were on their way, and I had no idea how this was going to end. One thing was clear. This morning was no longer about coffee and eggs. It was about to get serious. The cafe felt like it was holding its breath. Even the faint clinking of dishes from the kitchen had stopped. Everyone was either watching or pretending not to watch as Karen. Yes, I was now mentally calling her Karen. Walked near the counter, phone pressed to her ear like she was reporting a national emergency. I leaned back in my seat, trying to appear calm, but my mind was racing. She had called the cops over a hat. A hat, this could not be real life, right? Karen, meanwhile, was in full drama mode. Yes, officer, he is right here, she said, voice raised for maximum effect. I feel threatened, and so does everyone else. This man's presence is causing a scene, and he is being... She paused, likely searching for just the right word to twist the narrative. Menacing, seriously, I was sitting there with toast crumbs on my lap. Mrs. Hernandez thankfully stepped in again, her voice soft but firm. Ma'am, please let us not make this into something it is not. Kevin has been coming here for years. He has never caused any trouble. Karen whipped around, her expression full of righteous anger. You do not understand. People like him. She pointed at me like I was some kind of wild animal. Think they can get away with spreading hate? I am standing up for what is right. Someone in the back of the cafe muttered, this is crazy, and a few people laughed. Karen did not seem to notice, too caught up in her one-woman mission. She put her phone back to her ear, repeating the cafe's address and saying something about immediate assistance. I glanced at Mrs. Hernandez. Sorry about this, I said, shrugging. Did not mean to turn your cafe into an episode of Cops. She smiled awkwardly, but her eyes darted toward the door, clearly worried about what would happen next. And then, like clockwork, the sound of sirens pierced the air. When a squad car pulled up, everyone shifted in their seats. Karen practically swelled up like a peacock, her face lighting up with self-satisfaction. She waved her arms to get the officers' attention as they walked in, two tall guys in crisp uniforms. They looked around, clearly trying to figure out what the disturbance was. Officers, Karen called out, walking toward them like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. Thank you for coming so quickly. I'm the one who called. I feel deeply unsafe. The officers exchanged a look. One of them, a stocky guy with a thick mustache, raised an eyebrow. All right, ma'am. What seems to be the problem? She pointed wildly in my direction. It is him. That man over there is deliberately causing a scene, wearing offensive clothing and making everyone uncomfortable. He is trying to provoke people. The officer looked at me, then at my hat, then back at her. He said, clearly not impressed. And what exactly did he do? Karen blinked, as if the question had thrown her off. Well, he is being aggressive and disrespectful. Officer, a younger guy who looked like he was one coffee away from falling asleep, glanced at me. Sir, he said, his tone neutral. Can you tell us what is going on? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Sure thing, officer. I was sitting here eating breakfast when this lady, I nodded toward Karen, started shouting at me about my hat. I did not say much, but then she called you guys. That is the whole story. The older officer rubbed his chin. So no threats, no physical fights, nothing like that. Nope, I said, emphasizing the P-E for emphasis, just me, my eggs, and some unwanted opinions. Karen gasped like I had insulted her ancestors. That is not true. He is being disrespectful, and his presence is the problem. It is disturbing. The younger officer's expression remained unreadable, but I could have sworn the corner of his mouth curved. Ma'am, he said slowly, are you saying you called this because you do not like his hat? Karen stammered. It is not just the hat. It is what it represents, and the way he is sitting there so smug. Eating breakfast, I added casually. Her face turned crimson. This is harassment, and I am not the only one who feels that way. She spun around, looking at the other customers for backup, but instead of nods of agreement, all she got were blank looks and a couple of awkward coughs. The older officer sighed and pulled out a little notebook. All right, ma'am, let me get this straight. You called us out here because a man is wearing a hat you do not like. Karen crossed her arms. It is not about the hat. It is about respectability. And he is sitting here eating toast. He clarified, glancing at me. Yes, but no yelling, no threatening, just toast. Karen looked like she might explode. You do not understand. People like him are. The officer held up a hand. Ma'am, I'm going to stop you right there. What you are describing does not exactly qualify as a violation or even a disturbance. Karen's jaw dropped. Are you saying you're not going to do anything? The younger officer folded his arms. Not unless he starts throwing his coffee at people. A couple of customers laughed, and I could not help but smirk. Karen, however, was not amused. This is outrageous, she muttered. You are supposed to protect the community. The older officer tucked his notebook away. Ma'am, you are welcome to file a formal complaint. But as of now, there is no reason for us to hold this gentleman. Karen stood frozen, her fists clenched. The officers turned to leave, but not before the younger one leaned down and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. Nice hat, by the way. I stifled a laugh as Karen's eyes bulged. The cafe buzzed with whispers as the officers walked out. Karen, still fuming, grabbed her phone and stormed toward the exit, but I had a feeling this was not over. Not yet. The cafe face slowly started to return to normal after the officers left. Karen, however, was anything but done. She stood by the counter, furiously typing on her phone like she was gathering troops for the next phase of her battle. People were whispering, a few shaking their heads, others quietly laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. I went back to my coffee, tried to ignore the tension. That is when the cafe door opened again, and in walked someone who instantly changed the entire energy of the room. Kevin, my man, shouted a familiar voice. I looked up to see Mark Sullivan, one of the most powerful people in the state, tall, sharply dressed, with an air of authority that made everyone sit up a little straighter. Mark was not just anyone. He was the governor's senior advisor and my longtime colleague for my work in public outreach. He had a way of commanding attention without even trying. Karen froze mid-text, her face a mix of uncertainty and suspicion as Mark crossed the room and tapped me on the shoulder. Good to see you, buddy. Governor loved your presentation this morning. Really solid ideas for the education reform campaign. The room went dead silent. Karen's phone hovered midair as if she had suddenly forgotten how to use it. Thanks, Mark, I said casually, just grabbing a quick bite before heading back. Mark turned and scanned the room, clearly noticing the awkward tension. His eyes landed on Karen, who was still standing stiff as a board by the counter. Everything all right here? Mark asked, his voice calm, but with an unmistakable edge. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I did not realize you were unconnected. Connected. Mark raised an eyebrow. Kevin here is one of the brightest, most dedicated advocates in the state. You did not recognize him. Karen's face turned pale. There was a misunderstanding, she mumbled. Mark's expression hardened. Misunderstanding? Because from what I have heard, someone made quite a scene over a harmless breakfast. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. I thought. Thought what? Mark interrupted, his tone sharp, that it is okay to treat people poorly because you oppose them. The cafe was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Karen looked like she wanted to sink into the floor, but Mark was not done. You know, he said, his voice now calm, but piercing. It is. Me, gestures or pats on the back. I sat back, took a sip of my now cool coffee and smiled. Sometimes the best way to succeed is to let the reality speak for itself.